So we'll give it a few minutes for people to join us. Good afternoon or good morning for some, or maybe good evening for some, depending on where we're all located. We're going to give it a few minutes to let attendees come in, and then we'll get started. Numbers have started to level off a little bit, so we'll go ahead and get started, and some people may still join us. So my name is Alexis Stokes, and I am work with diversity and inclusion at the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. So excited to have you to join us. This is the first of 2 sessions that we're doing to really dive into the hidden curriculum of applying to graduate school. And as a university, we are committed to increasing access into STEM fields. And so this is one of the initiatives that we have in place to move forward that goal of ours. So we'll go ahead and start with having our panelists to introduce themselves. And I will start with Matthew because he is on the list of me.
Good morning or afternoon, evening, everyone. So I'm Matthew Finney. I am a 2nd-year graduate student in the Master's in Data Science program. A little bit about my background. Before coming to Harvard, I worked as a management consultant for a few years, and I did my undergraduate degree in econ. And so, you know, people often say, oh, you know, I'm considering computer science, I'm considering data science for a graduate degree, but I wasn't a CS undergrad. I was one of those people who never took a computer science class in my life before coming to the master's program. And it's all worked out fine. So if you see yourself in that position, you know, please come apply and join us.
Thank you. We'll go to Haley.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Haley. I'm a 2nd-year PhD student in the Earth and Planetary Science department, and I study isotope geochemistry. So I primarily use oxygen isotopes to learn more about past climates and ocean environments. I was a geology major at Carleton College in Minnesota, and I graduated in 2017. So I took a 2-year gap in between graduating and starting grad school. And in the meantime, I did a variety of things, including interning for a senator and working at an ice cream shop and being a teaching assistant for a geology field camp. So another myth to debunk, along with what Matthew said about a variety of majors and all sorts of programs, is that you don't have to have studied whatever you want to study for the last 5+ years in order to be accepted or in order to be interested.
Thank you. We'll just keep going around. So whoever wants to jump in next.
I can jump in. Hello, everybody. My name is Thierry Tambe. I am a 3rd-year PhD student in computer science, and my current research interests focus on energy-efficient hardware accelerators and systems for machine learning, and in particular, natural language processing. And I do have a long industry journey prior to starting my PhD program. So I worked for a tech company for about half a decade, specifically Intel. I was a computer architect designing circuits for high performance computing system on chips. So I left my tech job in 2018 to embark on a PhD program at Harvard. And so far, yeah, it has really turned out pretty well. I was a bit concerned that the switch from industry to academia would be pretty rusty, because honestly, the first time I sat in a classroom after 5 years felt a bit strange. I had to remember, actually had to actually take notes, and even, you know, there were some reflexes even about doing homeworks that I had to quickly catch up on. But it really turned out well. The first year was the hardest, but now it's pretty smooth, I would say.
Thank you. Udit, you want to go?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Udit. I'm a fifth-year PhD student studying computer architecture. A lot of my research has to do with how do we design new hardware systems in order to improve the efficiency of emerging applications. And I'm really interested in terms of environmental sustainability and efficiency. So that's kind of been the focus of a lot of my research recently. A little bit about my history. I actually didn't have any industry experience coming into the graduate program. I came right after undergrad. I didn't really do many internships either. I just kind of wanted to go down the research path and figure that out and see if that was a good fit for me longer term. So that a PhD was a good way to try that out.
Thank you. Stephen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Stephen. I'm a third-year graduate student in the Earth and Planetary Science Department with Haley. I graduated college in 2017 and didn't really know what to do, but I knew that I really liked school. So I kind of hung around, did some research with some people I had researched with during undergrad, and discovered, you know, kind of just through my own exploration, that Earth and Planetary Science, the research possible in the Earth and Planetary Science department was really interesting and cool. And so I kind of shopped around and found that this was a really good fit for me. So I only ended up taking off 1 year, but it felt like the right amount of time. It was, you know, good to refresh and refocus and all that.
Thank you. So we're just going to dive right into our topic for today. And just so for some logistical things, we did disable the chat function, but you do have access to the Q&A button at the bottom. And so as we're discussing things, please feel free to enter questions into the Q&A, and we will incorporate those questions into the discussion that we're having. And then hopefully if there are any questions we don't get to live, we do have some individuals that kind of on the back end that are tasked with answering some of the questions within the Q&A that we may not be able to get to in our discussion. We'll also make note of the questions that are coming in. And so if there are questions we need to add, like to our frequently asked questions on our website, create some additional resources for you all, we'll make note of what you're putting in the Q&A. So let's just dive in. So did you always know you wanted to go to grad school, which some of you kind of discussed that in your opening intros, but if you want to add anything there of, if you didn't know, kind of what was that moment, or when did you start to think maybe this is something that I want to do?
I can jump in and start us off. I did not always know that I wanted to go to grad school. I was convinced that I didn't want to do more school the first couple of years of undergrad. And then I did a study abroad program in New Zealand for geology. And obviously New Zealand is beautiful. And I came back thinking that's something that I would want to keep doing. But then I waited for a while because I kept waiting to sort of wake up one morning and know what my specific interests or this like passion question that I would have that would drive all my research. And that never really developed. And I realized that like part of it was just that I knew that I was interested in geoscience. I knew that the questions that you could ask were really cool. And I had broad interests in deep time and stable isotope geochemistry. And so once I sort of had that realization that I wasn't just going to wake up one morning and suddenly be passionate about this one very specific question, I realized that I could apply and spend my academic career figuring those questions out.
Awesome. Others, when you decided?
I can jump in too. So I think I always knew that I wanted to do graduate school, but I had no idea what I was going to do grad school in at all. You know, I worked for 4 years, as I mentioned, as a consultant, and so there was kind of a natural path to go into business school. But I was someone who's working, you know, on a very technical field within consulting, and so I thought, hey, actually, I would probably get a whole lot more out of going into an engineering program in terms of the things that, you know, I would learn and the experiences that I would get beyond just what I was learning on the job in the consulting firm. And the kind of other piece there that factored into my decision to go the engineering data science route was, you know, maybe not the way that the world should be, but the way that I perceived the world was that as a person of color in the technical field, that credential would only help me. And you know, especially getting it from a leading engineering program would be meaningful in terms of, you know, allowing me to continue to advance in my career professionally. And I am doing a master's program, not a PhD. So the intent is absolutely to go back into industry afterwards. And so that was, you know, another factor for me in making the choice to do the master's in data science program when I did.
I can jump in here. So I started working for my tech job in 2012, and having a master program actually was a requirement. So I had a master program really out of a necessity, because in the circuits design role, it was yeah, you were required to have a master degree, and then while I was working there, at some point I realized that my work was becoming a bit repetitive and overchain, and also there were some restrictions in case you wanted to move on to something new. And also at the same time, machine learning was really taking off, and there was a big sense that it would be democratized everywhere. So I really left my tech job in 2018 to pursue a PhD degree. One, because I really wanted to expand my horizon and really stop really out of a desire to become a contributor in the field of computational machine learning and not just an observer.
Yeah, I may just mention that, like, for me, I think I always felt like I wanted to try research at least and see if it would be a good fit for me. I was fortunate in my undergrad experience to have an advisor that was very encouraging on like trying out different research things, trying out projects. Didn't necessarily go too far, but it was just like a fun experience talking to people. And so I wanted to continue that, or at least explore that. But when I was applying, I didn't really know if I wanted to, I wasn't convinced that I wanted to do a PhD. I didn't know what I was going to do it in. And so I ended up choosing a program where my future advisors, my current advisors, were individuals that kind of just said, you know, we'll figure out what our research is going to look like. You don't need to know all the answers right now. You don't need to know what you're like passionate about. Just as long as you're interested and want to put in the time and effort, they were willing to have me along for the ride.
So when you came to that moment of, you know, I'm really thinking about this, maybe this is something I want to do how did you decide where to apply? There are hundreds of programs that you are able to, to apply to. You are qualified and, will get accepted into these programs, but what were the biggest priority areas for you when making that decision of the where?
I guess we can continue in the same order, maybe. I thought about a lot of things, but something that was always in my mind was what my relationship with my prospective advisor would be, because in my field, it's pretty important. They are your boss for 5+ years. And I wanted to know if they were people that I wanted to work for, and that also if they had a track record of like prioritizing and retaining their students, especially students who were women. And so I did a lot of research, like looking at labs all over the country, and looking at the people in their labs and what kind of research they were doing. And then also, it's a little overwhelming because as you said, Alexis, there's so many possible places to go. And so another thing that I narrowed it down was also location. Like I did take into account where I wanted to live for 5+ years in proximity to family and friends, because I think that might not bother some people, but I knew for me, I was going to start a rigorous long-term program, and having at least some support or a place that I would want to explore and live was important to me.
To jump in here, so I was mainly looking for a PhD program where I could leverage the skill set that I had acquired in the industry. So in the industry, I was designing computer chips for general purpose computing. So in choosing where to apply, I was mainly looking to leverage this chip design skill set, specifically to design computer processors for machine learning. So that really narrowed down the list by a lot, because there aren't really many PhD programs in the US that have the capability to design and manufacture computer processors. So I ended up applying to about 5 universities, and Harvard was one of them.
As a master's student, I looked less into, specific faculty. That's not something that generally you'll need to do as a master's student. You don't get assigned an advisor in that way, and that's not a condition of your admission usually. So, my main area of focus though was, looking at what are the exit opportunities from different programs. And so that helped me to decide, where to go. Particularly since I did intend to go back to industry, and, getting a good job after finishing the degree was going to be very important to be able to actually pay for the degree. I looked at, networks of where people from different schools go, and, are those industries that I'm interested in going into? And that was, a significant factor in narrowing down to the 3 or 4 schools I actually sent applications for.
Yeah, I think for me, early in the process, in terms of where to apply, I kind of just looked at all the schools that seemed remotely reasonable in terms of my expertise and broad interests, and I just applied. And somewhere in the middle or like the end of the application process, I just started emailing people to try to see if I could talk to them, see who's a great fit. For the PhD programs, there's like this unique aspect of visit days, which is a great opportunity to meet people, see if you're a good fit for the lab, or if they're a good fit for you as well. So that was like, I think in that communication period, I started narrowing down, okay, I liked my conversations with at this university. And so I started narrowing it down in that perspective. And then what Haley was talking about in terms of like geographic preferences, I think my final decision ended up coming down to what I was most comfortable with in terms of lifestyle and proximity to friends and family. So yeah.
Stephen, what was that moment for you? What were the priorities you took into consideration?
Yeah, so I think the moment for me was when I was actually applying to jobs after graduating college. I'd gotten an environmental engineering degree, and a lot of the jobs that were available to me were like not that interesting to me. It was a lot of like waste management kind of jobs, which are important. It just wasn't what I wanted to do. And the jobs that I did want to do had to do more with like climate and climate research, climate policy. And they all said that I needed at least a master's degree, preferably a PhD. But I applied anyway and got none of them, of course. Um, and so, once I found myself, getting rejected from all these jobs and just kind of back where I was doing research um, in a place where I felt like I wasn't really moving forward, I kind of said, well, like if the jobs that I want require a PhD, I might as well get one. And um, there are other obvious factors or good reasons to get a PhD as well, but that's kind of what pushed me to actually do it. And then as far as choosing where to go, I think, other people have already said this, but the research opportunities and the geographical location. I grew up in New York, so my family is all there. My girlfriend's at the law school here, so it just kind of made sense to be in this area. And obviously, the research opportunities here are just fabulous. So I kind of felt like, even if I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, I could kind of figure it out, and there'd be somebody to work with. So it seemed like the right choice.
So you each kind of mentioned how you looked at the research that was happening there in some cases. In other cases, it was what were the alumni doing after they completed the degree. So as you were researching these programs, did you reach out to anyone at the institutions? And if so, how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, when as I sort of came up with a list of prospective advisors, I sent emails around this time, early October. That was the advice that I'd gotten because that's when most faculty have heard about their most recent funding, whether or not they've gotten grants and stuff. So they might have the best idea of whether or not they are going to take more students next year also. So I sent an email that said, hi, here's my academic background. Here's why I'm interested in what you do. And are you planning on taking students? And I got a variety of responses. Some people said they're not taking students. A lot of people said, because I initially was interested in a master's, a lot of people said, I am only taking PhD students. And some reached out and said, yes, I'm thinking about taking students. Why don't we set up a Skype session or something? And I ended up Skyping with all but one of the people I ended up applying to work for. And a lot of them also gave me the emails of their graduate students or postdocs in their lab. So I could also ask them questions about what it was like to be in their lab and work with them and live where the school was, et cetera. Yeah.
Others, did you reach out? And if so, how did you reach out or who did you reach out to?
I kind of did the same thing as Haley. I was told by some, faculty that I'd worked with in undergrad or even just people who had gotten PhDs to start reaching out kind of late September, early October. Had a bunch of phone calls, applied, and it was actually nice. I kind of went back and forth with some faculty at other universities throughout the application process. So yeah, I think that making contact was super important.
So I really see that as kind of one of those, when we talk about the hidden curriculum of applying to graduate school, that's one of those. It's not common knowledge that you should or you can reach out to faculty without knowing them first. And so I think that's one point that I would like to emphasize, that it is common for prospective students to reach out to faculty or reach out to programs. There's always reaching out to the admissions office, or if they have recruiters identified on their website. And I know Matthew mentioned that he was researching where alumni were going after the program. And so I'm not sure if he used LinkedIn, but LinkedIn could be a resource for that, to see where alumni are sending them a message on LinkedIn to say, hey, I'm thinking about going to the program. I see that you also studied at that program. And as Haley mentioned, just 15-minute, Zoom or Skype call to kind of ask you some questions. And oftentimes people are open to doing that.
And Alexis, if I could just add more on this. So I also reached out first by email to the professors I wanted to work with. And I think it's really important to spend some time to really understand what those professors actually worked on. And because oftentimes they may not respond because what you put in the email may be irrelevant to them, right? So I had emailed about 4 professors, and also 3 of them typed back to me. And I think doing some homework and actually finding out what they've been working on, and if you could, and when writing the email, if you can perhaps say how your background relate to what they've been publishing, I think that you will have more chances of receiving a reply. Yeah, I just wanted to add that.
I think that's a really good point of doing that homework beforehand, reading their websites, looking at what papers they recently published, maybe even looking at what are some of the courses that they're currently teaching, what are some of the projects that their current students are working on, so that you can make that connection in the email. Did you all attach things to the email? Did you attach your CV, attach your statement of purpose, or any of that?
Yes, I did attach the CV, and I actually went further. I attached a document kind of showing some of the computer chips I've been working on. So I think, that's what I did. So CV, and also a summary of the work that I did in the industry.
And I think something really important about the process too is like reaching out to faculty, but also getting in touch with students in the area. Because oftentimes, at least in my experience, I'm not sure about others, when I talk to the students and I ask them about their research, they'd say things like, oh, this is like a really interesting aspect of our field and it's really up and coming. You might want to look into this more, given that you're thinking about a master's or like a PhD, or like you're just starting out work in this area. Or they like point out specific people that either I hadn't heard of before because I'm looking at it from an outside perspective, or like I knew of before, like when multiple people would start saying, I really enjoyed working with so-and-so or collaborating with so-and-so. That would kind of like, that's actually like what got me interested in specific professors, and actually like my current advisor. Like I actually heard from multiple people how they really enjoyed working with the lab. And then I was like, okay, maybe I should spend more time trying to reach out to them and talk to them and things.
So when you think about the reaching out, or, really starting to market yourself, which is not the most comfortable thing to do, especially whether you're in undergrad or you're even out in industry, that's not really something that we're told to do a lot. We're not necessarily told to market ourselves. And so if you think back, were there ways that you marketed yourself, or maybe you didn't because you didn't know, and now you say, I could have done this or I could have done that?
So I didn't do any, marketing of myself to the graduate programs directly before I applied. But in retrospect, that's definitely something I would have considered, particularly coming from an industry background and not directly from undergrad, and also, coming from a non-computer science degree and going into a computational program. I probably could have met beforehand with some of the faculty from the program, or the executive director, any of those people who sit on the admissions committee, just to give them a little bit more of a background on, hey, like, here's my story. You probably don't see a lot of people with my background apply, and so here's what you should know from my background that might help you make a decision. But I did a lot more, like marketing associated with just the idea about applying, right? So I definitely spent some time figuring out, how do I tell my story in the application materials, considering that I do have a background that's, non-traditional when it comes to, looking at people in CS graduate programs. And then, there's another component of marketing I had to do just to kind of market myself to the people who were going to write recommendation letters for me. Especially if, you come from a background where, like, people aren't necessarily going to expect you to go to graduate school, right? You might need to do a little bit of overcoming that, to kind of like help your recommenders, think about you as someone who could apply to an engineering program at a top tier school, right? And prep them to write the most salient experiences that they had with you that are going to also be relevant to the graduate program, right? And set those obviously in the context of the industry that you were in, or the undergraduate work you did before, but also help them think about, well, how do I market Matthew, who has never taken a CS class, to an admissions panel that is going to be, largely CS professors?
Others on how you marketed yourself. Did anyone go to conferences as an undergrad, or even once you were in industry, and kind of some of the graduate fairs that happen at those conferences?
Yeah, so part of the other than emailing people and starting that process, there's a big conference called AGU, which is the American Geophysical Union, and it's a huge conference every December. And when I applied, a couple of the emails that I received back were, great, glad you're interested. Are you going to AGU? We could meet there. And so I met with a couple prospective faculty there, and one I got coffee with, and the other was just a very quick sort of flyby. But having that face-to-face contact and showing that you are both interested and actively engaged in that community already, I think is also a good way of marketing yourself. And one other point is that I wasn't actually presenting at AGU that year, because I wasn't in school. And so I went for just one day in order to meet these people. And so it's great if you can be sent via school or something, but otherwise it is a conference.
I didn't actually have the opportunity to go to any conferences when I was applying, but I think as far as marketing myself goes, I think I was able to market my interests. So we've already kind of talked about this, but I read a lot of papers by the people who I was applying to work with, and I was actually just looking through some of the emails I'd sent, because I still have them saved. And in these emails, I did talk about, like, I find this paper interesting, I have this question, whatever. And so I wasn't marketing like my skills necessarily so much as like my interests and my thoughts. And it seems that the professors liked that quite a bit. They said, oh, that's great, here are some other ideas, and so on. So I think that was good.
There's something I really want to pull out here is, one, the timing of when you all were reaching out and sending these emails. And so I know Haley mentioned early October, and then something else you mentioned, it was before a large conference that you knew that a lot of faculty in that field were going to be going to. And so that timing seems to be important, especially if you're able to get your university to sponsor you to go to those conferences, which is definitely something I would encourage individuals on the call to look into, that if you are currently in school, to see if your university will sponsor you to go to those conferences. If you're in industry, a lot of companies have professional development funds in their budget, so your employer may sponsor you to go to those conferences. And that's something you can mention in those emails to faculty of, I will be attending X conference. And so it would be great if you're going to be there, check the conference agenda. Maybe that faculty is already there, already on the agenda, and you know that they're going to be presenting. And so saying that you plan on going to their session as well. And so, and I want to connect this to a question that we got into the chat. You mentioned that you asked in the email, are you accepting PhD students this year? It feels a little forward. Do you ask it on the first email or after you've met with them over Zoom or after a few other emails?
I did it right in the first email because most faculty know right away in October, November, that whether or not they have the funding or the ability to accept more students. And so rather than continuing the conversation for multiple more exchanges and then finding out that they're not even taking students, I did ask in the first email. It is, and that's part of the sort of discomfort of putting yourself out there and being forward. And I think there are some questions, like you could wait, but there are some questions like that feel a little uncomfortable when you ask, but are really good information to have right at the beginning.
I actually just express my interest in joining the research group instead of asking whether they accept PhD student. So in the email I sent to them, I said, so here's my background, here is my experience. I think that I have the skills to make an impact in a research group. And therefore I would like to join your research group. That's kind of how I wrote that email. But I would like to further add to the previous question about marketing, if I may. So I think that right now, I mean, we most of us are working from home, and we get to record videos about many of the promotion that we do. So I think that if you perhaps had to present perhaps some undergraduate work or some undergraduate research, and if you have a video link to that presentation, I think it would be beneficial to actually include the link to that video on your CV as a way to show your prospective professor that, hey, this is what I did, and actually go ahead and check it out. So I've just encourage undergrads to do posts if you have videos of presenting some interesting projects. Do include those links on your CV.
That's a really good point. Oh no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you can go ahead, yeah.
No, I was just gonna say that's a really good point, because right now all of the conferences are virtual. So if you are presenting, doing a poster presentation or presenting at a conference, maybe go ahead and have a friend or have someone even from your own computer, like press record on your Zoom to record you presenting. And that may be a very quick, easy way for you to go ahead and record your presentation. But go ahead, Udit.
Yeah, I was just going to build on that, on the point that Jerry and Alexis are saying. I think one of the unique aspects of this time is that conferences are going online. And so it's an opportunity as well for, if you're applying or interested in learning more about research opportunities, to attend these conferences. Oftentimes, especially like in the CS community, I've seen a lot of the registration fees be a lot more affordable. You don't necessarily have to travel to conferences anymore. And so it's like more financially viable from that perspective as well, and time viable. And they're also supporting registration fees and things like that. And a lot of these conferences are going to have like I just attended one last week where there was like an undergraduate mentoring workshop where undergrads or even like master's students were able to like connect with senior researchers and talk about research opportunities, figure out if PhD or master's programs are a good fit for them and things like that. So I think there's like fantastic opportunities. So if there's like a conference that you're interested in, just see if you can attend, and it could be a really good opportunity.
And see if they have financial aid opportunities. Some of these conferences will have a page on their website to apply for grants or a scholarship to attend the conference. So another question we have, going back to kind of the letters of recommendation, how did you approach faculty or others? How did you choose who to write the letter of recommendation, especially for those that may have been taken a couple years in industry, so it had actually been a couple years since you had interacted with any of those individuals?
Yeah, that is, if I knew in advance what applying to grad school would be like, I think I would have spent a little bit more effort to stay in touch with people I worked with in undergrad, just to make sure that, I had people from academic experiences to be able to write letters of recommendation for me. But then, the other side of that coin is speaking, specifically to master's programs. And I know this can be different for PhDs, but for master's programs that have kind of an industry focus, they do allow you to submit recommendation letters from people who are not academic faculty. And so, it's not a be all end all to have like your college professors write the letter if you took a few years off and went to work. If you have someone else who you worked with directly, who might not have like the most important title in the world, but who can speak to, your strengths and validate some of the things that you wrote in your resume or your statement of purpose, that is, extremely valuable, right? And probably more valuable than having a letter from a college professor from like some freshman calculus class or something. And the other part of that question, or I think maybe this was another question I saw in the Q&A, where someone was writing about how do you apply to grad programs that don't study what you studied in undergrad. The letter of recommendation for me was really important for that too. Because I was able to pick people I've worked with professionally who could write about experiences where I did things that involved programming and could demonstrate like those core computer science competencies, even though I never took a CS class in undergrad. And so if I'd gone back to my college professors, that actually probably would have hurt me for letters of recommendation, just because what I was applying to for graduate school is very different from what I did in college, and more similar to what I did professionally.
And I think Matthew made a good point there when he said, there may be a difference in this requirement between master's programs and PhD programs. And so this is one of those questions that would be really good to send to the admissions office or to any of their recruiters to say, do you have specific requirements or preferences when it comes to who writes the letter of recommendation? This is something you also could end up asking the faculty member once if you're able to have conversations with them later on or jump onto a Zoom or a Skype, if they have a preference, because maybe the program doesn't have a requirement of who writes, but that faculty member might have a preference in the letters of recommendation. Other thoughts on the letters of recommendation?
I was just going to say that that was another thing that I found pretty uncomfortable is reaching out to people and saying, hey, can you write this glowing report of me so I can get into grad school? Obviously, I didn't phrase it like that. But I think like one of the things that I learned throughout the whole process is that your professors really do want you to succeed and want you to help you succeed or want to help you succeed. And so a lot of the emails that I sent were, hi, I enjoyed being in your class or multiple of your classes, like especially this project or especially X, Y, or Z. And I learned a lot, and could you write me a recommendation? And sort of reminding them about what class I was in with them, what projects I worked on. And then, maybe even one of my professors asked me to like attach, the final project that I did so that they could have specific things to say about me. And so professors, even if you haven't talked to them for a few years, they want you to succeed enough that they will like put in the extra effort to write something specific and help you out. So they're on your side.
That was a really good.
I guess one anecdote. So I was just gonna say one anecdote, kind of building off of what Haley was saying from my side was, I asked a professor that I'd taken like 2 or 3 classes with that like tangentially worked on a research project with as well. Not super closely, but yeah, I asked them for a letter of recommendation, and I ended up bumping into them a week later in a computer lab at some point, and he pulled me aside and he was like, like I saw your email and I wanted to talk to you because I think you would be a good candidate, but at the same time, like I can't say something that's qualitatively different about you that you won't already have from the other people writing your letters of recommendation, which I thought was really interesting because some of the advice that he gave me was when you're writing emails to professors or industry folks on asking for recommendations, make sure that you ask them, can you write a strong letter of recommendation? Because you really want them to write as strongly as possible about you. And then the other piece of advice he gave me was try to think about what you want people to know about you, like what you want people to know about like your projects, if you've had other experiences in clubs or organizations or teaching. And then once you kind of have this picture that you want to paint about yourself, then think about like who are the best people in your life to talk about each of those aspects. And there could be people that you ask because you TA'd a class with them, or you did a completely different sort of club or organization. Like that was one of the things, like one of my organization advisors, I was involved in like a student electrical engineering club. We hosted social events and things like that. I asked the advisor of that club to provide a letter of recommendation for me because I thought that was a really important part of who I was.
So another question that we have here is that when you are a little unsure or a little more unsure around the specific area of what you want to do, how can you still market yourself, or how can you still kind of craft those emails and things when you are still in the place of trying to decide?
I think the way that I did it was, because as I said, I didn't have one specific question that was sort of driving my research yet. When I was emailing people, said, I'm interested in your work because of the kinds of questions that you ask or the instrument that you have that can answer a variety of questions. And I kept my interests vague, like I'm interested in researching deep time using stable isotopes. And that, while it may sound specific to people who might not be in the field, is like a very broad, there's a lot of different types of isotopes, and there's a lot of geologic time that you can look at. But I think being broad about your actual interests, but then being specific about why you are interested in the specific professor that you're reaching out to is the best way to do that. Because I don't think that most professors are looking for you to have an exact idea, at least for PhDs, of what you want to study for the next, 5 to 40 years.
How did you decide how many programs to apply to? Did you take into consideration, I might really get into this one, and this one is more maybe of a reach school, as we kind of phrase we use in career access. So how did you take that into consideration? And then, acknowledging applying to grad school is expensive. And so how that also may have played into your decision.
So applying to grad school is expensive, but it doesn't need to be. So, at Harvard, for our graduate programs, we do offer some fee waivers. And so if that's a situation you find yourself in where it would be a hardship to pay that application fee, I believe you can apply for the fee waiver right inside the application this year. And especially with, COVID-19 putting people in different types of circumstances, definitely make sure that that's, an option for you if that's something that you'll need. But then, beyond that, yes, it is expensive. And, it was not a hardship for me to pay the application fees, but it definitely is a deterrence to applying to too many schools, right? If you apply to 4 schools, that's already $500, $600, in addition to anything you'll pay for the GRE, etc. And so for me, I tried to be fair at the schools I applied to. So I'm feeling more confident that application deadlines and response deadlines for the different programs, right? And so sometimes you have programs that have a rolling application cycle or maybe have several rounds. And sometimes you have programs like Harvard that have 1 round, but it's very early. And so you can go ahead and apply to your Harvard, wait until February. And then once you know whether or not you got into Harvard, then you can decide if you want to still apply to university of somewhere else, right?
Others, maybe Stephen, how many did you apply to?
Yeah, I only applied to 5 schools. I don't know if only is even a good word. I applied to 5 schools. And while this might sound like overly simplistic, but I really only applied to schools that I wanted to go to. I think some of them were more reach and maybe some of them are more like realistic for me to get into. But I kind of went through the criteria of does it have the research I want to do, and is it in a location I want to be? And there were some good schools I just didn't apply to because I didn't want to be, wherever that school was. So I think, like I think Matthew is saying, it's expensive to apply to school, so don't apply more broadly than you need to.
We have a question wondering if anyone on the call is an international student. Huh?
I used to be, but I'm no longer.
So we'll make sure to keep that into consideration when we're crafting future e-panels such as this, to make sure that that experience is reflected, because we do understand that there are different questions, concerns, and experiences that will happen from that perspective. So I want to be mindful of time. So before we wrap up for today, the last question I want to pose to each of you is, what advice would you provide, to yourself let's say that if you could kind of go back in time and provide some advice to yourself, maybe as a freshman or as a sophomore in undergrad, what would that advice be when it comes to graduate school?
I think I would say two things, which is one, I wish that I'd taken more math and computer science. So if I'd known that as a freshman, that would have been great. But also that I waited for a long time to figure out, as I said, the like specific thing that I was really interested in. But I think having a broad idea and being curious and interested in research, at least on the PhD side of things, is enough of a reason. And you don't have to wake up one day and have a deep passion for a very specific thing, I think. So I think I should have told myself.
We can just kind of go around for each of you to share.
Sure, yeah. So I would tell myself, don't be your own enemy, right? Don't let that imposter syndrome kick in and keep you from, go getting what you want to get and asking for what you need and doing what you want to do. And that applies to so many parts of this process, right? From reaching out to prospective, letter of recommendation writers or maybe faculty at specific programs, to applying for the programs, right? To, not psyching yourself out before you take any of the standardized tests, if that's something that you'll need to do, right? If you want to go to graduate school and you know how that's going to grow you, maybe you don't even know exactly what you're going to do afterwards, right? But you want to do it, you're going to grow from it, right? Then go do it, go apply, be your best cheerleader, right? Other people will rally around you, but you need to kind of create that vision. And then you need to tell other people what the vision is, and then they'll align to that and push you forward. And the schools, generally love to see that too.
I think one thing that I wish that I'd done earlier is definitely, I wish I had left the industry a bit earlier as opposed to staying there for about more than 5 years. And I would just encourage people to really do pursue your passion and don't be afraid to break from things that you feel like is holding you down. So definitely, feel free to expand your horizon and really pursue. So if you have a passion in research, do go for that, and don't be afraid to leave the industry.
Yeah, I think for me, it would be kind of twofold. One would be just try as many different things as you can get access to. You never know how your interests are going to change, how your passions are going to change over time. So just exposing yourself to as much variety as possible is great. And then I guess the second thing would be, this is like usually like applying for grad school can be a really stressful process, but also try to have fun with it. Try to find something in the process that you really enjoy. I think for me, it ended up like at the end of the process, when I looked back, and it ended up meeting all the people and talking to them and learning all about the cool research stuff that everyone was working on. And I think if I had just had that in my mind going into the process, I might have maybe gotten more out of it.
I think the only thing I would tell myself is to, as an undergrad, be patient and don't stress too much about figuring out exactly what I want to do. You know, as a sophomore or junior in college, I was like, oh, you know, what's my job going to be? What internship am I going to get? I think just focusing on working hard and learning, and you know, if you are thinking about grad school, kind of exploring what you're interested in is really important.
Thank you. Thank you. So I do want to remind those that are watching that we do have a session next Thursday at 5 p.m. That will focus specifically on the letters of recommendation and statement of purpose aspect of the graduate application process. So please visit our website at cs.harvard.edu to access registering for those sessions. We also have a session geared towards those that are thinking about environmental science and engineering or earth and planetary science on next Wednesday at 5 p.m. You can engage with the faculty and current grad students to ask about, you know, what are the options related to environmental science and engineering and earth and planetary science. And then on Friday, our computer science and applied math faculty are hosting a networking session. So visit our website to register for any of those events. And we hope to engage with you in the future. And to answer that last question that came in, it is not too late to reach out to faculty. So definitely take a look at faculty's websites. They may have, you know, instructions of how to contact them, but it is not too late to start reaching out. All right, so we hope to see you to join us next week. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Matthew. I forgot about the Masters in Computational Science and Engineering and Data Science session on Thursday. That is also posted on our website. Bye-bye.